Hey guys, what's up? Okay, I got a question. It's a rhetorical question, so I guess you don't really need to answer it, but at the same time, I would really like to see some logical arguments on this. Help me out here. I've been pondering this for a while now, ever since bumping into a rather colorful individual who was harassing Ruby Dynamite's videos. You know, back when the whole thing was exploding with Pop, 42 in California. Why is there such a freaking emphasis on God and country in this country? Particularly with Christians? Why is that? I am highly confused by this. Why is it that you find fanatical Christians who are not only ridiculously gung-ho about their religion, and they won't see reason if it has something to do with their religion, but why are they also fiercely patriotic? I do not understand the mix. I really don't. Can somebody enlighten me on this? Because it makes no freaking sense to me. Well, I'm sure I understand why it's done, but logically it makes no sense. See, here's the thing. If I remember the years I went through Catholic school and the years I spent talking to fanatical Christians when I was younger and all the stuff they tried to shove down my throat, God's kingdom is the most important kingdom. And that's the one that you're supposed to be preparing for. Not just the one in heaven, but the one that's supposedly supposed to be coming back down to earth on Judgment Day. Everyone who's a Christian is basically supposed to be a vassal of God or Jesus Christ, depending on who they happen to consider higher. I know they keep saying that Jesus is God, but remember there's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, which they still have yet to explain how that makes any sense. And most of them focus primarily on Jesus. God the Father kind of takes a back seat. They basically are a vassal. They're vassals to Christ. After all, they do call him Lord. So basically these guys are still living under a feudalistic system. They believe that they have to become servants or slaves for their God. Some of them even go so far as to say they need to be warriors for their God. Which begs the question, why does an all-powerful, almighty deity need a bunch of humans to do his fighting for him? But that's another question. These guys are basically living under a spiritual feudalistic system underneath this particular God, and that's the one who they're supposed to serve. And everything that's going on in this earthly realm, this material realm, is supposed to mean nothing, because everything needs to be geared towards heaven. Remember, the whole thing is about what's going to happen when you die. What's going to happen when you die. Remember, even, atheists on YouTube, every now and then, they keep getting that threat. You're going to find out when you die what's going to happen to you. The ultimate thing is what's going to happen when you die. The major focus is on, that's another interesting I find. The focus is mostly on death. It's pretty much a death religion if you focus on it. It's a bit of a death cult. There's not that much focus on life per se, except on what you're going to be doing when you die. Because the death thing is the more important part. What's going to happen after you when you die kind of deems your importance. If what you're doing is going to put you supposedly in hell after you die, then you're not worth talking to. Whereas if what you're going to do is going to get you in heaven when you die, then you're somebody of worth. So all this focus on this spiritual realm and on this supposed otherworldly ethereal kingdom, that's supposedly their major focus. So why is there suddenly a focus on this earthly kingdom, i.e. America? America, after all, is a, excuse the phrase, kingdom. I know it's not a kingdom, but this is a country that is a material one. It's an earthly one. And its values are materialistic, particularly capitalism. It's all about making money and gaining land for yourself so that you can be rich and whatnot, which supposedly is the things that will keep you out of heaven. Jesus himself said, it'll be easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than it will be to enter the, for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's clear in the Gospels. He says this. It's in the red freaking letters in many Bibles out there. Yet, you find hardcore Christians defending this philosophy, saying this is what you're supposed to do, and saying this is God's country. And they will hammer that point that this is supposed to be a Christian nation, and we're supposed to be following Christian values, and this is the number one nation on earth simply because it's a Christian one. Aren't you supposed to not really care whether this nation is Christian or not, because ultimately it's about getting into God's kingdom? And last time I checked, America was not God's kingdom. Kingdom come has not arrived yet. Otherwise you wouldn't be waiting for Jesus to return. He'd already be here, ruling America. But he's not. So why the focus on this? You get that one nut, I still remember him, God's Guns, what was it? God's Guns, Guts, and Glory. Which still, that name still makes me laugh my ass off, because how do you mix those? God's Guns, Guts, and Glory. If you care only about God and religion, the Guns, Guts, and Glory part really shouldn't be in your name. Those things are things that will block you from getting into the kingdom. Guns! You gotta be able to defend your country! I thought the whole thing was about turning the other cheek and not killing. Guts! The only guts that you really need, in essence, is just, the guts to live your faith and being willing to turn the other cheek when your enemy slaps you down. Last time I checked in the comments, this asshole put up, that's not the type of guts he's been displaying. And glory! The only glory you should care about is the glory of God. Not your own, and definitely not the glory of your country or anybody championing it. So once again, I find myself asking, why the mix? What the fuck? I don't really understand this whole push for God and country. It makes no sense theologically or logically. But I know why it's there. Let me give my reasoning, and if you think that I'm wrong and you want to give me a counterpoint, go ahead, but I haven't seen an argument yet to say that this is wrong. The whole push for God's guts and country and all that really blew up after World War II. This is not to say that this hasn't been going on before, but it was a little bit downplayed, especially in the beginning. The Founding Fathers were quick to tell all these other religious guys that this is not going to be a religious fucking country. We've seen what happens in Europe. We're not going to have it here. This is ruled by the people, not ruled by divine right. Worship your religion if you want to, but we're not sanctioning anything. But after World War II, when, the powers that be realized that, hey, there's something to militarizing this country and this whole fascistic sort of thing. We're going to be a powerful empire. We need to make sure that the people are behind us. And that's when there suddenly was a major push towards patriotic thought and being completely behind your country and pledging allegiance to the flag and marching in step. And this sort of thing needs a little bit of a religious fervor to go with it. For despite fanatical Christian claims to the contrary, the phrase, in God we trust, really didn't become a national motto until the 50s. It didn't get put into money in the 50s. And interestingly enough, the only reason why they were able to get away with that was because the Supreme Court ruled that in God we trust was used so much that it no longer had any religious significance. You gotta remember, it's a secular country. Secular only means that they tolerate other religions and they do not sanction any one over the other. So if in God we trust was a strictly Christian phrase, which isn't, but if it was strictly a Christian phrase, they would not have been able to get away with using that and putting that in money. But since it was such an overused phrase by then, go in, throw it in there. There's no religious significance whatsoever. That's what the Supreme Court ruled. Go ahead, look this shit up. The internet is not just for porn. Not only that, but the Pledge of Allegiance, which has always been spoken, well, I shouldn't say always, but it was in this country for a while. But that phrase, under God, that was not put in there until the 50s either. Again, this was simply to enforce allegiance. To kind of enforce this sort of bow down to the government just as much as you bow down to God. And it got united in that basis. But it had nothing to do with promoting Christian values more than it did to making people blindly follow whatever the government does. Which at the time, they saw that the world had become a clean slate after World War II. It was time for a land grab. Don't believe me if you want, but there's been plenty of writing on this subject. Even Gore Vidal, who was living at the time, when he saw what was going on with the enforcement of pledging allegiances and under God and all that, he was like, damn, we've imported freaking fascism in this country. I wouldn't go that far, but it was kind of stepping in that direction. So that's pretty much where this whole thing came from. And these Christians going around saying God and country and all that don't realize that they're being fucking pawns for a system that simply wants you to march in steps so that you won't question what they're doing around the world. Because America wasn't this militaristic and caring so much about effing with other countries until after World War II. Before, they didn't care. Remember, they didn't even want to enter the war until other countries were effing with them in the first place, because they were like, let them F themselves up. We're running our things on our own. Now all of a sudden we had to be the world's police. Go ahead and tell me if it's different, but again, last time I checked, America wasn't mentioned in the Bible as kingdom come. So unless you happen to have a better argument, I really don't think you are, you guys are simply being pawns for a system of control.